Our speaker this morning is Dr. Barclay Braden. Barclay has a couple of master's degrees. I know some of you know her. A couple of master's degrees. She graduated from Stanford, then got degrees at NYU. And what's the Durham?
The Turner Institute is
Turner
where I got my doctorate
Institute,
in psychology.
where she got her PhD in psychology. And she is the author of this book, Faith at Hand, which is about depth journaling. And she's going to tell us all about that. And she is a great friend and supporter of the center, has been involved with this place on and off for many years. And just a dear, wonderful soul. And I'm so happy to invite her to speak with us this morning. So give her a nice warm welcome.
If you want your own copy, there's some available as a love offering in the bookstore. I am so full of gratitude and so full of appreciation to have this moment in my life with you. And thank you for coming. Oak Brook has been very important to me for a long time. Probably as long ago as 15 years, I would have made my first visit here. And there are a whole series of things that tie it together that I want to share. But in the meantime, I wanted to explain the title of today's talk a little bit, because I think some of you might be wondering. The title of my book is Faith at Hand, and the subtitle is Finding My Way to Depth Journaling. And you need to know what depth journaling is. When Cindy asked me to give this talk this morning, I said, well, I've never given a sermon before. And she said, it doesn't have to be a sermon. It's just a talk, and it's for 28 minutes. And I have to be sure I see the clock. Just is it moving? Is it set? What time is it? 10:35? Is that what it says?
There's one here, sir. You're good.
Oh, that one. Thank you. No, all right. So I want to be careful to stick within my time.
10:50.
All right. Thank you. So, finding my way to depth journaling. The finding my way part's important because I was in the process of a 20-year odyssey that the book talks about, where I went from basically no interest at all in my spiritual life to an ardent interest in my spiritual life. So, as a psychologist, and especially a psychologist interested in adult development and how we learn and transform, I was quite intrigued when I started thinking about this book, that there were these kind of pivotal moments where things shifted a little bit and added up over time. But when you're living it, you don't know where you're headed most of the time, or much of the time. And you have to just keep going ahead on faith anyway. In this process, I discovered a powerful tool. It's really almost more than a tool. I think of it as a spiritual technology, which has to do with writing with the non-dominant hand. And I'm going to be sharing some of that in a minute. My experience when I started doing it was asking a question in my journal with my regular hand, and then switching the pen to the other side and writing, allowing an answer to come through. It wasn't like automatic writing where my pen was just moving on its own. Some people can do that, but mine was more just getting quiet, asking a question, but then getting quiet and listening. So part of this has to do with listening. And while I was listening, the words started to come, and I started to write them down. It's very slow, very awkward. It feels like you can pick what, I feel like I can choose the words I want as I'm going along, and if I don't like what's coming, I can kind of brush that off, and then it'll come in a new form. It'll come. Anyway, before I continue any further, I just wanted to point out that this tree is a tree of contemplative practices. And I was excited when I found it because I don't know whether you can see the words at all from where you are, but it talks about communication and connection awareness, and then it branches into all these different types of contemplative practices. This is really made to order if you live the kind of the spirituality that Oprah talks about, or Science of Mind talks about. And I was pleased because on this, we have a stillness branch that includes things like meditation, quieting the mind, centering, silence. I think journaling could also fit there. But journaling's on this big branch they call, it's up here on the creative branch, where there's music and singing and journaling and improvisation, arts. There's the generative branch, visualization, beholding, loving kindness, all these things. Ritual, cyclical. The point is not that we're going to do every single one. We don't have time for that. But if you're interested in this kind of thing and want to think about it some more, just Google a tree of contemplative practices and you'll find it. Anyway, I didn't think about journaling as a contemplative practice for a long time, or as a spiritual practice, which is something I was kind of finding my way to. But once I started this left-hand, right-hand thing, I realized that I was getting a voice that was way deeper than my regular consciousness. And that's why I didn't have a name for it for a long time. My husband finally suggested that I name it, and he suggested depth journaling. And as a psychologist, it resonated immediately because there's a term, depth psychology. How many people have heard that term, depth psychology? Okay. Well, when he suggested it, I said, depth psychology. Then I had to go back and check, well, what exactly is depth psychology? Well, it has to do when the unconscious is involved, which isn't something people think about all the time, that there's a part of our mind that is not in our own awareness. It's kind of buried down there or in there. And so this technique is really like depth psychology. It's finding that inner place that's deeper inside you. And could you, Shanna, could you possibly click on the other slide for this? Okay, so when I write in my journal, is it focused? Can people see it? Okay, when I write in my journal, that's what it actually looks like when I use the other hand. And I thought I'd just plunge in and read a journal entry. It'll give you the idea. This was yesterday. Oh, Faith. Oh, by the way, when I first started talking to this voice, I said, well, who are you? What's your name? And the answer I got was, I am the voice of Faith, which felt just right to me because it was sort of like part guardian angel, part fairy godmother, it was just right. It was kind of on the cusp of the me and the not me, the bigger me. So she, in her addressing me, she's always called me child, and I let her. Because it feels like I'm talking to someone who has a maternal aspect. So this was yesterday. Oh, Faith, tomorrow's my day to speak at Oak Brook. There's so much I've been thinking about, so much to weave in, so much I could touch on, so much I would like to share. It's hard to decide how to arrange all the parts and pieces. My mind keeps generating new connections and sidebars, new angles. My mind does not help me zero in, streamline, simplify, condense. I'm naturally a divergent thinker. My mind goes out in all directions. And right now, for my talk tomorrow, I need to be a convergent thinker. I need to bring it all together, pull it into a simple, straightforward shape that I can readily communicate to all of you. I need to let go of my regrets that I've not yet learned how to do a perfect PowerPoint. Like Paula, my friend, raise your hand, has these perfect PowerPoints. I have to let go of my regrets that I've not learned how to do that. I feel grateful for this opportunity. What could be any more meaningful than to share my favorite learning experiences with a room full of kindred spirits, especially in this particular room of Oakbrook, which has played such a vital and significant role in my journey over the last 15 years. Oh, Faith, please help me find a good path through this maze of possibilities. Please be specific. So I got Barclay child. First, oh, this is what it looks like. FYI, I don't know if you can get a glimpse. First and last, you want to invite and to entice your listeners to explore their own inner landscape in what may be, for many, a new tool. Non-dominant handwriting activates new brain circuitry, new neural connections that can allow for new ideas and new kinds of awareness. Fresh perspective is the key. The Science of Mind slogan, change your thinking, change your life, says it all. Your own tribute to that fundamental idea lies in your adaptation of that original idea into shift your pen, shift your consciousness. You go to my website, just my name, barclaybraden.com. You'll see right away, shift your pen, shift your consciousness. And it's a direct steal or inspiration from Change Your Thinking, Change Your Life. Be sure to emphasize that each individual holds the power to nurture and cultivate our own learning, our own growth, our own exploration, our own expansion, and ultimately our own transformation. It all lies within our own two hands. And if you get really curious, I'm going to stay for an hour afterwards from 12 to 1:15 and we'll actually do this together if you're interested. The rest of the page says, depth journaling, as you've chosen to call this self-inquiry dialogue, takes place between different levels of consciousness, some of which are normally not in view. This simple tool, always at hand, provides a powerful spiritual technology drawing from hidden awareness, helping to bring the subliminal into the liminal. Into the liminal, across the threshold, into new perception, new understanding, new possibility. And then I was called to draw my favorite personal symbol, a heart with radiance going in all directions. How many people have ever heard the word liminal before? Oh, good, a few of you have. Well, for whatever reason, I love that word, but I don't use it very often. And I was thinking about it the other morning, and I thought, what is it actually? Anyway, I had to kind of go back to the basics, the dictionary. And it has to do with being on the threshold. I thought, oh, that's perfect, because we're all on the threshold. Every last one of us is on the threshold. And we can't see where we're going. And we need to find guidance. How many people remember that magic 8 ball from when you were a kid? I see nods going on, okay. Well, my experience, and probably similar to others, is I remember asking your question, whatever felt important, does he like me? Does she like me? Whatever. And then waiting for that answer to show up. And it was so exciting to see, what is that answer? Well, it's kind of like that when I do this other handwriting. I lay out what I'm concerned about, I ask my question, and then I get an answer, and it floats into view through the other hand. The science of that is not really studied. No one really knows for sure, and it's not as popular as I think this tool should be. It's not that well known. It's not new to me. I found it kind of on my own, but it had already been used by other people. And so if you Google other handwriting or non-dominant handwriting, you'll find a few things here and there. But the sense that I make of it, as I thought about it as a psychologist, is that, we're cross-wired. Our right hand goes to our left brain, and our left hand goes to our right brain. And so one thing, when I first found this, I thought, oh, I'm right-handed. If I use my left hand, I'm connecting to my right brain. And at that point, there was a lot of popular interest floating, being sent via email about, are you right-brained or are you left-brained? And left-brained is I always think of the L words for left, logical, linear, the rest of them are coming to mind, lawyers, things that come in a linear sequence. And then left brain that's left brain. Right brain is supposed to be more big picture, more creative, more visual, different kinds of awareness from the logical side. So it turns out, upon a little further research, that that's overly simplified to say that you're just connecting with your other side. But I think if you like that idea, there's enough validity there to go with that. Let me just see, I don't want to get lost here.
You're okay.
Okay, all right. So that's why I called the book Faith at Hand, because it's right at hand, and it's the other hand in my experience. Okay, I wanted to talk about this room being important in my life. When I first moved to Ocala, I was familiar with Science of Mind. I discovered it in a study group on A Course in Miracles. People used to bring in their magazines and their books and stuff like that. We sat around this little ante-room in a congregational church in Williamstown, Massachusetts, and someone went, San from Massachusetts, and someone in the group would bring in her old Science of Mind magazines. Well, I never heard of it, but the slogan, change your thinking, change your life, grabbed my attention immediately, and then I started subscribing, and the more I learned about it, just through the magazine, the more it converged with my interest as a psychologist. And as I said, I was going through a 20-year transformation at that point. So as I was starting to become more and more interested in that place where spiritual awareness and psychological awareness come together, like in meditation, journaling, it became relevant to use the magazine. And I started, in addition to my daily reading of the Course in Miracles lesson, I started reading a Science of Mind daily guide. So I wasn't doing a journal yet at that point, because I felt like journaling was, this is what I was talking about with Pat in advance, the journaling feels like it's something that other people do. I can't do it. And I had friends that were journal keepers, and I just thought, I'll never be a journal keeper. I just felt like I wasn't interested. But I was getting interested because A Course in Miracles asks you each morning with the lesson of the day to put something into mind and to keep it there and to teach yourself to go back to that over the course of the day. So it was helpful to start these things together. And then I also was exploring other things that were more like oracles, more like the magic 8-ball idea, like angel cards. How many people know about angel cards? Oh, good. Well, they fit right in. What I would do often, the way I used this is as my spiritual practice developed, was that I would write my question out, and then I'd let Faith give me my answer, but I didn't really trust her completely at first, because it's sort of like I had this feeling like, oh, I'm just making this up. And if you get that feeling, I don't think you need to pay too much attention to it. I just sort of, at this point, brush it aside. And so what if you are? Isn't that wonderful? So, let's see what I want to tell you about this. So, to get past that feeling that I'm just making this up, I found it helpful sometimes to let her give me an answer, and then to randomly open A Course in Miracles to a lesson, or to think of a number, 47, and go to 47 and see what it said. So I'd get a message again, and often that message, of course, I'm sure you've had this experience, someone's nodding in the back row. It fit right in. You knew you were on the right track. You knew the Spirit was trying to tell you something important. Well, then sometimes I go from Course in Miracles and I look at the Science of Mind Guide for that morning, and it was like, oh my God, it's the same word even, you know. So then I got or I draw an angel card and it would be exactly the right word that had shown up in these. So you can see that doing this again and again over time, my level of trust in the process grew. And the thing that I love the most, and I guess if you try it, I hope you'll find your way of doing this, that feeling of deep joy that you're connecting with the larger awareness, and deep joy that you're being spoken to, that you're really listening and you're also being spoken to. So that's the thrill of it. When Reverend Cindy asked me to speak this morning, she said that, I said, what do you want me to talk about? She said, well, how about journal keeping as a spiritual practice? 10 minutes? Okay. Journal keeping is a spiritual practice. Well, I've told you enough about it now. You're able to see how I've used it. But in the process of thinking about it, I spent a lot of time thinking about spiritual practice. And I realized spiritual practice has so many things. I mean, that's the tree thing. So many different ways that we can sort of apply our spiritual being to a situation. And I started thinking of ways that I do it myself, like email. I think of my email as a spiritual practice, or texting, but more email. But I want to say something that addresses the situation, of course, but that sends something of uplift or brightness to the person I'm writing to. Conversations with my husband in the morning. I have heard about every facet of every difficulty in every significant aspect of his life for longer than 30 years. So it's not new material. But the way I listen is a spiritual practice. Because I'm listening probably like I listened when I was practicing as a psychologist. I'm listening for the deeper message. And that's what I think this is about, is finding a way to listen. You'll hear words this morning that are going to catch your interest. And finding our words is, I think, sort of a big message. And I want to be sure to include the fact that don't be put off by the journal keeping thing. You can do this other handwriting whether or not you're a journal keeper. You can find words to live by whether or not you're putting them into a journal. Before I got to the journaling stage, I had a big envelope. And I would encourage, if you feel like you can't do this, I would encourage you just to get a big envelope that appeals to you. You can decorate it or whatever. But and you can, anytime you find a word or a thought or a prayer or idea that lights you up, just toss it in the envelope. And it doesn't matter how often you do it. People think, oh, I'm doing it every morning. No. I do it when I want to and when I move to do it. And every time I write in my journal, I don't necessarily use the other hand. It takes quite a while. Give yourself room to do it and relax into it. Let me just see. So I hope you'll find the joy. I'm wrapping up now. I hope you'll find the joy. And if you want encouragement in your spiritual practice, one thing I would suggest is that you talk to Reverend Cindy about Insight Timer. Is that something you shared with the group? Insight
I
Timer?
have not.
But you will now,
I will
right?
now.
All right. It's a realm unto its own that you'll find out more about. Meanwhile, I'm going to conclude with, how many minutes do I have?
A little more than 5.
Okay. I'm going to read you a chapter from my book. The title of which is Science of Mind. Now, I intended to tell you all the different things I've done in this room, but it's a long list. I intended to tell you about the butterfly effect and the overview effect, and we haven't gotten to that, but in a nutshell, the butterfly effect idea is the fact that one tiny motion, like the wings of a butterfly flapping in Argentina, can cause a typhoon halfway around the world. And we don't know when we start these little things where they're going to go. So I'm in favor of that. And I'm also in favor of the overview effect, which was a term that came into being after the astronauts flew up into space and were able to look at this little beautiful planet for the first time not being on it. And that was a moment when everything in the world changed, as you know. One of the things I did in this room was coordinate a Ocala IONS group. IONS is an acronym for Institute of Noetic Sciences. And one of the astronauts had a spiritual experience coming home from the moon, Edgar Mitchell. He couldn't believe he had this cosmic consciousness. He couldn't believe he'd had it because his training was very mathematical and engineer-based. And anyway, it was that curiosity that led him to start the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And anyway, that was one of the things I did in this room. The last thing I'll mention before I read a little bit is that at one point, when this room got divided, or got undivided from one side into a larger space, and they, 5 minutes, thank you, they laid the carpet. Anybody who had contributed to that project got to write something on the floor, so that if they ever take this carpet up, right near where Susan's sitting, in that back area, underneath on the floor, there's a big heart with the rays going out. Okay, I won't read you the whole chapter. I'm just going to conclude with the fact that I was talking about finding science of mind, and I wanted to read to you, after years of relying upon the teachings as I derived them each month through the Science of Mind magazine, when we moved to North Central Florida just after the turn of the century, I would find a vibrant community of kindred spirits at Oak Brook Center for Spiritual Living in nearby Ocala. I learned from Reverend Peggy Hostetler, my minister friend there, that Ernest Holmes was born and raised in Maine before moving to California in 1912 at the age of 25. And then I talk about some of his influences. And then I conclude the chapter with a quote from Holmes, but I hadn't seen other places. But as he has such a gift, and this says it all. This is from a booklet called The Path of Discovery, written by a Reverend Scott Aubrey, whom I learned about through the magazine. And he's describing how excited Holmes got when he discovered Emerson. So those of you who are familiar with someone with lineage will appreciate that. So here's Holmes's words. There is a divine urge within everyone to know more, to be more, and to express more. And I have found that the thing we are searching for is the thing we are searching with. Out there in the vast reaches of outer space, and here in the equally vast reaches of inner space, everything is in order. Our task is to begin to understand that the universal mind is resident everywhere, and also of necessity within us. Our prayer is that the truth be made known, that it cannot fail, to be revealed.
Mm.